My name is Debbie Drennan, and according to my peers, I am an AT specialist and a leading expert in the AT world, in my own mind at least.
No, she really is. And I'm Janet Nunez, and I'm known as the what-if girl of the AT world. And hopefully I'll be asking Debbie some of the same questions that you may be asking yourself during this presentation. All right, we also will be having some special guests, but more on them a bit later. Let's talk about the objectives, Deb.
So today, hopefully, you will learn about what is the difference between considering assistive technology in the IEP process and an assessment, what the best practices are regarding an AT assessment, and what are the elements of a quality AT assessment report, and of course, resources that are available to assist the teams with assessment and the implementation process.
Yeah, we may also hear from some of our dear neighbors.
Oh, yes.
Agnes and Gladys, and they've had their own experiences with assistive technology. As a matter of fact, I think I hear them now. Let's listen in.
Knock, knock, yoo-hoo, Agnes!
Oh, hi, Gladys. Good to see ya. What's cooking?
Actually, I've got a lemon cake in the oven, so thought I'd come over and chat. I've got family problems.
Really? Do tell. What's going on?
Well, it seems my granddaughter isn't making much progress educationally, and my daughter is at her wit's end.
Your granddaughter, Samantha, the one with autism? Oh, she's such a cutie pie.
That's the one. She's still nonverbal and has had the same goals in her IEP for 2 years now.
2 years?
Yeah. Nobody on the team really seems to know how to help her communicate.
Well, have they considered assistive technology for her?
Assistive technology? I think the problem is no one knows anything about technology. How can they consider something they don't know about?
So true, Gladys. This reminds me of a story about my grandson, Joey, the one with dyslexia. The IEP team did something called a consideration process during the IEP meeting. So instead of just checking a box, they had a real discussion about Joey's needs and the particular difficulties he was having in the classroom. They had a special form to use, a real process, and everyone participated.
Really? How fabulous is that? Tell me more. Oh, wait, there's my phone. I'd better run next door and answer. I'm expecting a call from the plumber. I'll check back later.
See you, Gladys. Whoa, well, Debbie, that was interesting. Seems like Agnes has some good tips for us. Can you recap a little bit about what that consideration process is like so we can all be on the same page?
Well, before I do that, I want to find out, was anyone, if you were here for our last webinar with the AT Network about consideration, please just raise your hand so that we have a sense of who was here before so we know how in-depth to go. Okay, we got a couple people here. Excellent. Good, good. Okay, so we have, it looks like we have 4. Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that we know. Okay, so let me go over it real quick. So what does the law say about consideration of assistive technology? We're not going to ask you because only 4 of you were there, but I'll answer that for you. The law says that assistive technology needs to be considered for all students who have an IEP, an individual education plan. That's the law. That's in Ed Code. Okay. In terms of what a framework is for consideration, we'll go into that a little bit more, but one is called the SET, the student, the environment, the tasks, and then you look at the tools. Another framework is TEST, where you do a task analysis, then you look at the environment, then you look at the skill set needed to perform the task as well as the skill set for acquiring new skills that the student has, and then you look at the tools. And there are 4 outcomes of consideration, which I will go into real quickly. What we're going to talk about now real quickly is the definitions of AT, so everyone's on the same page. No-tech means it's a no-tech option. It refers to a change in the environment. Low tech would be tools and items with simple or no electronic parts. Mid tech is simple electronic battery operated items that require little training. And high tech is things with motors and multiple electronic parts, and they usually require a significantly more training on those devices. So what are the steps to consideration? Again, real quick, because this was all in the last time's webinar. I just want to make sure everyone has the same background.
And it is archived.
Yeah, it is on the archive now on atnet.org, so you can check on that if you need more. The first thing you do is review the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. Second thing you do is, of course, develop the annual goals for the IEP.
And Deb, just a quick note here. Sometimes people think they develop the goals after the technology.
Never. It's always you develop the goals first, and technology becomes a part of the goal. You would then identify the tasks necessary to accomplish those IEP goals, and then determine the difficulty of the student's tasks or their barriers to success. And then you identify appropriate supports and services, which does include assistive technology. And the thing to remember, it's always the least complex solution that removes the barriers to that achievement should be the first consideration, always. Why? Because it's easier to implement, requires little or no training, it's more likely to be used and therefore more beneficial, and it encourages independence.
Great.
So that's where the team should start.
Okay, and I remember you showed a form at the last consideration.
Right, and here's
webinar.
a simple form called the SET form, Student Environment Task and Tools. This was created by Joyce Zabala. And there's a number of forms out there like this, but basically it reiterates the first thing you see is the IEP goal being addressed. And then you have a column for the student, what are the student's strengths and needs, a column for the environment, the classes and the situations where the help is needed, then a column for the tasks. What are the tasks that the student needs to do in order to meet the IEP goal? And then you look at the tools. If you're planning on coming to CSUN, I will be doing a 2-hour presentation, and one of the things I will be going over is we're going to get some hands-on time with this particular form. So I hope those who can come to CSUN will have that opportunity to do that with me.
And you need lots of practice.
Yeah, you really do. These forms take some time. Okay, so the other one is the test form. There's no real form for it, but we can create that. And the session, TJ, is the day before. It's the AT Network day before session, and I think that's on the ATNet website. If it's not, Alan or Rosemary will correct me. Okay? So it's the day before. So the other one is, again, the test form, which is by Iris O'Call, and that's task, environment, skill set needed, and then the tools. So that's another sort of a form you can use as well. And there are 4 outcomes to consideration. The first is that AT is not required. The student is making adequate progress on their goals. The second is that AT is required and the IEP team knows what that is and lists it. This is what the student needs to accomplish the goals.
So maybe continued use of the same AT they've been using that's been successful.
Correct. The third is that AT is required, but trials are needed to determine the appropriate assistive technology. In other words, the team knows that the student will need some way of, let's say, writing appropriately, and they know that it's going to be a pencil grip, but they're not sure which pencil grip the student will use best, so they're going to do some trials on pencil grips to determine which pencil grip is most appropriate. And the final consideration outcome is that the team needs more information.
Right, and that was a lot of information you just gave us.
Right.
So
remember, it is all archived.
It is.
So you can go back through that and get some more information.
But you know, I think I hear Agnes and Gladys.
Oh, they're back. I hear them too.
Knock, knock! Yoo-hoo, Agnes! I'm back! It wasn't the plumber, after all. It was my daughter. And she's so excited about this new information. She wants every detail. So what happens in that consideration process?
Well, Gladys, here's the deal. The IEP team came to the conclusion that they needed more in-depth information about Joey's needs, so they conducted an assistive technology assessment.
Really? You can do that?
Sure. The team can decide, as as a result of the consideration process that an assessment is appropriate. But also, a parent, did you know this? A parent can request an assessment at any time.
Oh, that's wonderful. So who did this assessment for your grandson, Joey? Did they bring in an outside person?
Well, Joey's district had an AP specialist that helped coordinate the team, but everyone was part of the assessment process. The teacher, my daughter, my son-in-law, and Joey himself. You know, he has very strong opinions about what he likes and he doesn't like. You know, he doesn't like my meatloaf.
I know.
But it was real important to get him on board, just for that reason. In your granddaughter's case, you'd need a speech and language professional on the team who knows about the different technologies for communication, from those low-tech pictures to those fancy speaking devices.
Oh, sure. Okay. Sounds like Joey had a good experience, but what should my daughter do?
Well, Gladys, here's the deal. It sounds as if her team didn't consider assistive technology appropriately in the first place.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't use a consistent process. She should ask the team to reconvene to thoroughly consider assistive technology. And if there isn't anyone on the team knowledgeable, she should request a knowledgeable person to be at that meeting.
Yeah.
The outcome of the consideration process will either lead you to assessment or not. It's that simple. It's one of the outcomes.
Oh, Agnes, that information is fabulous. Oh, you are such a dear. I'm going to call my daughter now. Oh, and I better check on my cake, too. I think I smell something burning.
See you, Gladys. Well, Deb, that's good advice from Agnes. Now, it's important, I think, to remember to make sure to talk to your team about using a consistent process and having someone knowledgeable about AT on the team. In Gladys's daughter's case, they needed to go back to do a consideration process. So I think we need to explain a little bit better the difference between consideration and assessment.
Well, consideration is what happens during the IEP team meeting itself. It's a brief process, and decisions should be made on known information. In other words, what the team already knows. And the consideration process ends when one of those 4 outcomes is selected.
Oh, so it ends at the end of the meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Because there should be an outcome selected. And assessment may be a result of that consideration process. It can also be a result, of course, of parent request, as we've heard. It is more in-depth, and it includes trial periods as well as data collection, and it reveals new information.
Okay. So consideration ends when an outcome is selected, and assessment begins when we start uncovering new information. So why is assessment then so important?
Well, assessment is important because there was a study done about AT abandonments, and this is an older study done in 1999. It's called the Matching Persons with Technology Study. I know 1999 isn't that old to me, but for some of you it might be. And what it basically said is AT gets abandoned because, 1, the technology is not well matched to the individual need.
And that's probably because there wasn't a good assessment done.
Correct. 2, little or no training was provided.
Training, always
training. 3, the families were not accepting of that technology.
Probably because they didn't have the training.
Exactly. Or 4, the school or the workplace is not accepting of the technology because they were not involved in the assessment process.
And I know that teachers can feel overburdened sometimes with those extra tasks that technology
can do. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up is in the Family Center on Technology and Disability, FCTD.org, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway, the January issue of their newsletter had a whole article by Dr. James Lenker, who is an assistant professor of rehabilitation science up in Buffalo. Basically said, one other thing he said is motivation. Is the student or the client motivated to use the technology? Because sometimes, let's face it, we have a goal for a child or a client that's not their own goal for themselves. So they won't be motivated, intrinsically motivated, to use any technology tools or devices that are put before them if they don't really care about that goal. So that's a huge factor that needs to be considered as well.
And that's why you need the buy-in.
Exactly.
From the individual.
Right, like Joey, who didn't like the meatloaf.
Yes, exactly.
The other thing to look at is the funding sources. And some funding sources do require a full AT assessment in order to pay for those devices. And that's a really critical thing to be aware of. The most important step is to identify the right tool for the job. I have a personal experience. My son John, who's now 18, when he was very little, he has cerebral palsy. He was 3. He had his first little tiny wheelchair, little manual wheelchair with a lap tray, and he'd never really used it before. And he was nonverbal at the time. And we had a very excited speech therapist working with us, and decided John at the time needed to get a Dynavox. Well, back in the day, Dynavoxes were not small little devices. They were full-on computers that weighed quite a bit of poundage. But John could use one appropriately. He understood the symbols, he could go through the pages well, and he understood how to use it to communicate. So they went ahead and got it for him. And that was, at the time, again, back in the day, that was $15,000. So we were all excited when the speech therapist came in with a device, with John in his chair, with a little lap tray that he'd never used before, and then they put this device on the lap tray. And remember, kids with CP are tiny, usually don't weigh a whole lot. Can anyone think of what might have happened when we put that Dynavox on that little lap tray?
Well, I can.
Oh, let's know. You know the story.
I think
he fell forward.
Fallen over in his chair.
He tipped forward. The weight differential was such that he tipped forward, and he never touched it again.
Well, that was an expensive lesson.
That was a very expensive lesson, but that also taught me the importance of looking at the whole picture, not just a part of the picture.
And trial using.
Trial using.
Whenever you can.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So let's go deeper into assessment.
Right. Agnes mentioned that her daughter's team had an AT specialist, and that's great. But Deb, let's face it, not many districts, if any, well, there are a couple that I know of, have the luxury of having AT specialists on board. So we need to find out who should conduct AT assessments. There's a lot of questions about who is qualified, and are there any laws about who should conduct an AT assessment?
Well, in education law, I'm going to jump to the bottom of the slide first. In education law, there are no specific requirements noted, except that the assessor must be, quote, qualified, unquote.
That's pretty vague.
But in best practices, it really depends on the goal being addressed as to who should do that assessment. For example, let's say you have someone with a communication goal like Samantha. You really need to have a speech-language therapist involved in that assessment process to decide which device is appropriate or which tool is appropriate. With someone who has fine motor issues and you're looking at writing goals, you need to make sure you have, let's say, an occupational therapist involved in that AT assessment. There's also some funding source requirements, like Medi-Cal. If you're using Medi-Cal as your funding source, you need to have a medical professional, a doctor, a speech therapist, writing that assessment report. So you have to look at the funding source requirements as well.
So it is a good idea for the parent to ask what qualifications or experience the assessor has.
Correct.
What other elements define a good assessment, though? Is there any kind of standard?
Well, there's best practices, and these come from the Quality Indicators for AT, which is www.quiat.org.
Some people say quiet.
Oh, hush. And these are best practices. First of all, the procedures of the assessment are clearly defined. You know what the assessor did and how they did it to do the assessment.
So they would state what framework
they're
using,
what tools they used, exactly. It should also indicate a team approach, that the assessor didn't go in a vacuum, but that they talked to the client, they talked to the family, they talked to the team, different team members, to involve them in that assessment, get their feedback.
Because everybody has their own ideas about what the student may need.
Right.
Or even what their current skills are.
Exactly. It should indicate student and family involvement when appropriate, and that it should be conducted in the student's customary environment. So if you're looking for technology tools for the student to use in the classroom, the assessment should occur or at least have an observation of the student in that classroom setting so that you have a sense that they are aware of what that customary environment is.
That makes sense.
It should include a trial period of any tools or features of tools that you are considering for that student, and data must be collected. And we'll go into that a little bit more. What does that mean? And recommendations then are based on the data collected. And then, of course, it's an ongoing process, so reassessment may be needed as changes occur in their student's environment and the student's skill set. This is an ongoing process.
Not a one-time event.
Exactly.
I think the team approach idea is great because it's so important to get everybody's input, including the student and the family. Deb, what are the objectives, though, of an AET assessment? Can you clear those up for us?
Sure. Well, some of the assessment goals would be, first of all, and these are from Browser and Read, Education Tech Points, or Bowser, sorry, not Browser, different thing. First, does the type of a technology we are trying actually do what we thought it would do for the child? So if we're saying this student with fine motor issues who's struggling with writing, we're going to try a portable word processor for, well, does that make it easier for that student to write? So is it doing what we thought it would do? The second goal would be which of the solutions tried is most effective.
You might have a variety of things.
Exactly. You may have tried pencil grips with that particular student as well as a portable word processor, and which solution produces the most, in this case, written output for that child. And if assistive technology tried includes tools with a wide range in cost, is there data to justify the selection of one of the more expensive options? So if the student tried, let's go back to the fine motor issue again, a pencil grip, a portable word processor, and a laptop, is there data to show that the laptop is the most effective solution for this child?
I can see how the data is going to be very important then in terms of finding or the team actually getting consensus on a final recommendation. Are there any handy forms that you can share?
Absolutely. There's always a form. Always a form. But first, you start with the set. I think, again, going back,
familiar.
Yeah, we just saw that, didn't we? Going back to the set form, it's always important because what you really want to do is, first of all, be very specific about the IEP goal area being addressed. And then who is the student? And what are the student's strengths and needs? That should be in any assessment report. You should see who the student is, what is the goal, what is the student's strengths, and what are the student's needs. And then, of course, go look at the environment, look at the tasks related to the goal, and then start generating some tool ideas.
Right. So the set form or the set framework could actually be the first step of an assessment. It's not the assessment itself.
No, it's a step in the assessment. That's correct.
Okay. So the team could start with it. And if they had done this during the consideration process,
then you're on your way. Absolutely.
Then we're on our way. Okay, so that makes sense. That makes it easier. I imagine a good assessment, like good consideration, also has a process, though.
Right.
There's certain steps.
Absolutely. There's always a process, right? First of all, the assessment process is to identify and define the problem. If someone says, oh, my student is struggling with reading, well, reading has a lot of elements to it. So you need to further define where the struggle is in reading. Then you need to start gathering your information. You can use the SET process, you can use student records, interviews, observations, all of those things are part of that assessment process. And then you start generating and prioritizing your AT solutions from no tech to high tech. And then you develop an AT plan. Who is going to try what with this student, And if it's tools that the student doesn't have available to them in their classroom or at home already, how are you going to get those tools for that student to try? That's all part of an AT plan. Then you conduct your AT trials and collect that very important data. Then you formulate your report with your recommendations based on features of tools that were helpful. And then you document it in the IEP. Okay. And this is from natry.ukky.edu. So if you need further information about assessment or from Kentucky, yeah, they did this.
Okay, so the first 3 bullet points, those are pretty clear because that really looks like part of the consideration process. If you haven't already done that, you could do that outside a process, outside the consideration time. But again, it's a team process. It's everybody's input, right? It's not an expert model.
Right.
Somebody's just coming in and doing the assessment. You want to involve everybody.
Correct.
Where I see it getting a little stickier here is at the point where you need to conduct the trials.
Yes.
Because I can even see the plan being developed. I guess first, one of the first questions people might ask is where do I even, if we have decided what we want to use, where can I get the equipment to even conduct trials or software without having to purchase it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a huge question that a lot of people have. For the more high-tech, expensive items, check with the vendors. A lot of vendors, and even software, have demo trials that you can download or get a demo CD with. More and more it's a download. You can check with vendors for some of the higher expensive equipment like AAC devices. Oftentimes local vendor, they'll have a local sales rep you can connect with, and they'll get you a trial of that because they're invested in selling it, of course, to you.
And that's why it's important to make those connections with local reps.
Know who your local people are. And I heard that the AT Network has a wonderful AT device lending library. Actually, I've used it before. I've not just heard it, I've used it. And that's another great resource to try some different things out. You may not have it in your own AT device lending library area, but my understanding is this is California-wide. So it can be sent up to you from, somewhere different so that you can try it for those 3 weeks with that particular client.
And there's no cost?
And there's no cost. And there's 13 locations. There's also the public libraries. And I understand from you, you actually found
some software.
Right, you found software.
And some other literacy software.
Right, in a public library. So there's another place to check. And of course, check within the school districts and the CELPA. I can't tell you how many classrooms I've been in where I'm working with another student and the teacher says, oh, you know assistive technology? Let me open my cupboard. And you open the cupboard, out spills all this great stuff that they don't know what to do with because it was in the classroom when they took over the classroom. So always check around to see where things are.
Right. Okay. So there are some places that we could actually find the materials and equipment. Who should conduct the trials?
Well, a good AT plan, going back to that AT plan again, will designate who is responsible for trials and data collection. And the best plans don't put everything on one person. They spread the wealth because that way no one's getting overwhelmed. So it could include the teacher. It could include a speech therapist, maybe the occupational therapist, maybe the parents at home if it has to do with homework or goals that continue to be worked on at home. These are all people that can help conduct the trials and gather the data.
Okay, great. Well, it's survey time. So now we will collect some data from you. So we would like those of you who have actually seen a formal AT report, a written report, raise your hand at this time.
From anywhere.
From anywhere.
An AT assessment report. Okay, there's a couple. Good, good. Okay, excellent. Quite a few of you have. Wonderful. Good.
Okay. And of those people who have seen the report, how many of those reports actually had an area where they had input from the family and the student, an interview with the family?
Okay. So a couple of you. I'm hearing a few dings here. Okay, all right. So a few, not all, but a few. Okay, good. So that's about half. That's about right. Okay, good. And how many of those people had recommendations based on well-defined data, that you could see the data they gathered? Anybody? Ah, 1, 2, 3, good. Excellent, good. Okay, so some of you have some really good assessors out there, which is good to know.
We've seen a wide variety of assessment reports.
Yeah, we have. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
But Deb, I'm sure that you have some forms.
Always a form. Always a form.
The assessment.
Now, what these are just some assessment tools that you can use, or that they can use, to assist them in the assessment process. So one of them is called the WATI. And it's still available up on their website, www.wati.org. And what this form does is it takes you through, and you don't have to go through all of these areas. You can go through the ones that are appropriate for the IEP goal that you're looking at. But it has information available to look at low-tech vision aids, environmental control units. It goes through fine motor issues related to computer device access, motor aspects of writing, composing written material, communication, reading, learning and studying, math, recreation and leisure, seating and positioning, mobility, vision, hearing, and then just general information. So it's very thorough.
So just take the sections that apply
to that goal. Exactly. Another form is from OTAP, Oregon Technology Access Program. And this form is actually from the QIAT listserv as well. And what this does is it gives you it's an assistive technology assessment process planner. So what's nice about this form is it goes through
the same points.
Exactly. Those same points that we just talked about is analyzing the data, conducting the trials, has this been done? And basically it's a checkoff so that you know that all of these elements are a part of it.
And it also has the space to write the person's name.
Exactly. Exactly. And then another one is from the University of, I forget where, University of Kentucky. No, Kentucky, I think. Anyway, I'm at UCAT.
Oh, but here you're on.
Okay, I'm on the UCAT toolkit. We don't know where it's from. We just guess. Anyway, the UCAT toolkit is also really nice because it goes through a whole list of tools that are available for assessment, starting with consideration, and then it has a pre-assessment profile form, an assessment data collection form, an assessment report outline, a trial implementation form for those trials, an AP implementation form, and a knowledge and a skills survey form. So it's very thorough, and all of this is available. These three sites, the WATI, the OTAP, the Oregon Technology Access, and the UCAT, these are all free, available online. So these are great resources.
So there's not one right.
No, there's not one right. But if if someone's using one of these tools, it should be listed in the report which tools help guide their process. There's other tools also for purchase, and two I wanted to mention was one. It's Don Johnston has one to just assess writing issues. It's a book that you can go on their website and purchase, and I believe it is expensive. It's $99, but if you're doing a lot of things like that, it can be a very useful tool. And also the American Foundation for the Blind has an online book that you can purchase for $25 on assistive technology tools that are available for those who are blind or low vision. So there's some other tools available for assessment tools as well.
I think we also have something from the American Foundation for the Blind that's a freebie online. Nothing free?
Not in this area, no. Sorry.
Oh,
darn. Everything costs money nowadays. Some other tools, these are reference tools now. These are not a report in and of itself. You may have heard of the famous click wheel.
It's not a report. One time I did see, and actually somebody called us and said that the school district would be doing an assistive technology assessment
using the
quick wheel, and that was their tool, which is basically a little spinner which will match up technology to the need.
Right, and that's a reference tool. It's handy.
Reference.
But it's not an assessment. You can't say, oh, you have fine motor issues. Flink, let me go in the fine motor area. Here's the tools you need. That's not an assessment.
It can guide the team. You would need trial use. you would need data collection, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera.
Some other reference tools, and these are all from the Technology and Media Division of the CEC, www.tamcec.org, and they're all available for purchase, is the AT fan, which is a similar product as the Quick Wheel, except it's in a fan form.
And you can use it on a hot day.
Exactly. And also there is a book called the AT Planner. So these are just some really nice reference tools. So another reference tool that you can use is called Stages. It's assessment software. And this is from intellitools.com. And this is specifically set up for those who have developmental disabilities. And what it does, it assesses the learner's cognitive abilities, their access abilities, as well as their language abilities. And it goes through 7 different levels. It addresses alternative assessment needs, and it has a selection guide then for curriculum activities, including software as well as off-computer activities. And they also have a separate stages for math. And a report wizard you can buy, which can gather all the data off the assessment stages software into a nice report that you can then present.
And how much is that?
$795. Not cheap, but you should know it's available. Okay? You can also just buy a book with just off-computer activities and recommendations for software for $39. So know that that's available. Another great tool is Compass, and this is for access. It's at infogrip.com, www.infogrip.com. And this is a great tool for specifically looking at computer and device access. It assesses over 3 input domains: pointing, text entry, keyboarding, as well as switch use. There is a free demo CD that you can get, which is a great if you're doing a one-time quickie, how is this working? You can do the demo, get a quick sense of where that person is. To purchase, it's $179.
So these might be some tools that the AT lending centers or
Sure.
centers might consider.
Yeah, if that's something they want to go in, the direction they want to go in, absolutely.
Okay.
But there's other tools out there, but I wanted you to sort of realize that if you're seeing a report and they talk about Compass or they talk about Stages, you have a sense of what that means and what that is.
Right. And there's also a really great book that we've used
Yes.
a lot that gives you ideas for data collection. And that is the How Do You Know It? How Can You Show It?
Right.
book.
And that's, again, that's free. You can download the whole thing or chapter by chapter off the wadi.org website.
And that actually gives you some really handy forms in the back for looking at different things for voice output, the device evaluation summary, writing speed and accuracy, vocabulary use. It's got a lot of neat templates in the back.
Right, and if you do, again, if you come to CSUN to our session with the AT Network, our little 2-hour bit that we have, I will have a hard copy of this to show people. And again, it is available free online, so if you can't make it, you can go to that website and look for the book, How Do You Know It? How Can You Show It? And look for yourself. It's a nice tool.
Great. So, Deb,
There's more
are there
forms.
some forms for trial period?
Always a form, always a form. There's some really nice trial period forms. And the nice thing about a form when you're using that with a trial period is you have one place to keep your data. Two, and there's more. One of them is called the Accessible Technology Trial Period Plan, and that's from the Montgomery schools, and that's a nice trial period form you can use. Another one is the Choose and Trial Assistive Technology form, and that's from Johns Hopkins University. And again, that's a really nice tool to use. And again, if come to CSUN, I'm going to have some examples of these tools for you to see and touch and look at, because sometimes you need to see it and play with it before you get a sense of what we're talking about.
Okay. So what are some of the ways that we can actually gather the data?
There's 4 ways to gather data. One is through interviews with a student, with a family, with a teacher, with a speech therapist, with whoever needs to be involved.
That could be pretty quick and easy.
That's pretty quick and easy. And it's also, if you're interviewing the student, it's most effective when the student can understand and answer those questions.
Well, yeah.
So make sure if you're interviewing a student with a cognitive disability, you're interviewing at a level they can understand. The second thing you do is review finished products. Have an example of work without, an example of work with, which looks better, which has more writing, which is more comprehensive.
A work sample.
A work sample.
Before and
right.
after
exactly.
using the technology.
Or maybe which one, timing them, how long did it take to do this one versus how long did it take to do that one.
And that's something concrete that could be presented at the IEP meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Consideration.
Another thing is to observe the student's performance. How long is the student taking doing the actual task?
Well, that raises a good point.
What is their face? Are they happy? Are they frustrated? Are they crying?
Because even if you did the work samples, you wouldn't know how long it took them to do each one,
exactly.
or if they erased a great deal, or if they cried over it. That's
right.
true.
Exactly, because that's all important information you need to gather. And really, effectively, videotaping is fabulous because they're in their customary environment. You can get someone set up with a little flip video camera, and you can show them using the tool. And you often hear, and we often hear, families saying, well, at home they do, okay, give them a flip video camera and say, show me. Show me, and that way I can see the environment that they're in when they're doing that task and using that tool, what's happening around them, etc. And yes, you can absolutely look at the independence factor. Is the student more independent or less independent using the tool? So really, when it comes to data, more is better.
Great. All right, so when we're collecting that data then, there are certain things that we want to be leaned for. You mentioned before about speed, whether the student can write something more efficiently using a device, but there are other things, other elements that we might look for when we're looking at performance.
Correct. We want to look at the quality of the work being generated. Is it better, worse?
What does better mean? I assume that then you really need to go back to the
goal.
question.
Right.
What is the goal? Framing that question. What does better mean? I think we need to, again, emphasize that the more specific you could be in framing your question for what you want that technology to do, the easier it will be to collect the data.
Absolutely. Because you also can look at quantity if that's an issue. How much communication is the person generating independently? Is that a consideration, or do you just want them to start generating communication independently? You would also look at speed, accuracy, independence or spontaneity, frequency, how often are they using it, as well as duration. So these are all different areas you can look at how performance changes with technology tools. But remember, when you're collecting this data, especially if you're showing them a higher tech device, collecting the data without any training on the use of that AT device, that's not helpful because they're still in the learning stages.
So you might need more time actually to conduct. How long should a trial period actually last?
It depends. How's that for an answer? It's a non-helpful one. Sorry. But it's true. It really depends on the student and the tool you're trying. The features of the tools you want the student to access. You can get extensions. If you're doing, under the school rules, you have 60 days in which to perform and then report out on an assessment for a student. If you're trying a a series of high-tech tools, you can ask for and have the family agree to in writing an extension and explain why you need that extension on the assessment. If you are trying some tools out that you need more training time on to really get a sense of, does the student get it?
But we're looking at weeks in this case. Yes. It's not just a couple of days or...
Well, it could be.
For a higher tech.
For a higher tech, it's weeks. A couple of days can be lower tech, absolutely. You can put a bunch of stuff out there and see what works.
Okay, that's great. So if we do all this data collection, what kinds of answers might we find?
Well, first you'd find out what AT is required, hopefully.
That is the point.
That's the point. But the other thing you'd want to know is, does the tool make a difference? And does it make the difference we hoped it would make? Is the assistive technology necessary for FAPE, that is a free and appropriate public education? Or, for those students not on an IEP, is assistive technology required for equal access under a 504 or ADAA?
And you talked about that in consideration webinar.
I went over all of that in the consideration webinar. And must the AT be provided outside the school if the student needs to use it to do homework, to communicate, to continue to work on their IEP goals.
And that would be written into the IEP.
Absolutely. Exactly. That should all be part of the IEP.
Okay.
On to the report.
Okay.
So, well, and let me just say, when you're looking at a report, this is what it should have. And this, again, is not the law. This is best practices. I want to make this clear. The elements of a quality report should, of course, have the background information on the student or the client, the reason, what is the goal for the assessment,
the reason for referral.
The reason for referral, and then what the goal is. Why are you there?
That's where you frame the question.
Exactly, frame the question. And then what process or procedure were used during the assessment? Did you use the WADI?
Did you use the quick wheel?
Did you use the quick wheel? Did you do observations? Who did you interview, and when did you interview? And of course, review of records as appropriate. And then what trials were done, and any the data collected needs to be there too. So copy.
Probably the date and time of the trials, because sometimes that may influence the child's performance.
Right.
They may be more tired in the afternoon than in the morning if you're trial using.
Exactly. And then you have a data analysis or a summary. And then in the recommendations, you're recommending the features of the AT tools needed. So you're saying what features of these tools is the student benefiting from?
And those reports can be of any length. We have seen in our center reports that have come from outside school districts and agencies that have been 1 page and 15 pages.
Right.
We have seen reports that at the end of the day, the recommendation was that the student would benefit from assistive technology.
And can you guess what kind of report that was? Not a good one. That's not helpful.
So again, since there's not a standardization, you may see a wide variety of AT reports. But again, this goes back to best practices.
Right. And so the other thing a report should have are the outcomes from the data. And what are those outcomes? One is that AT made a difference. Great, AT. Another one would be AT did not make a difference. And then you have to go back to, did we ask the right question? Or motivation. Is the student not motivated no matter what we put in front of them? And that is common. That does happen. Sometimes you can put the greatest software tools or the hardware tools in front of a student. If they're just not motivated to read, they're not going to help.
Right. And face it, maybe AT is not the answer.
Exactly. Maybe it's a behavioral plan instead, or something else needs to happen first. And then go back and revisit AT. Another one is that we still don't have enough data and we need more. And that's when I told you about asking for extensions. And that you can ask for that in writing. Another one, and that's absolutely fine. Another one is that the data uncovered unexpected information, and the team needs to frame a new question. And this actually happened to me. I was asked to go down to a high school to work with a student who was struggling in algebra, Algebra 1. She had done really well with math. She had a physical disability. And then all of a sudden, Algebra 1, she was lost. She could not make progress. Well, when I went down there, I realized a couple of things. One, she was in a new school. 2, she had a new one-to-one aide. And she had been using a calculator since she was in 2nd grade. So she could do all the mathematical things she needed to do on a calculator because she could read, see the problem, put the problem on the calculator, generate the correct answer. But with a new aide, in a new environment, looking at algebra, she couldn't do it. And the reason was, I found out that she didn't understand the one-to-one math correspondence. She didn't know that 10 meant 10 items. That had gotten skipped for her. So she was great with a calculator, but she didn't understand numbers. And of course, if you don't understand numbers, you're not going to do well in algebra. So that was interesting information that I was able to generate from trying to going out there and assessing who the student was, looking at their environment.
Maybe a new goal.
Exactly. And a new was.
For that student.
And that ended up being the outcome, is the student ended up with a new goal to go back to it.
Okay. So that makes sense. Those are 4 outcomes from the data. Now, there are also certain agencies that need
items.
Yes, certain elements stated in the report.
Correct. A great place, now if you're looking at a speech-generating devices, and you're looking for Medi-Cal or private insurance to pay for that speech-generating device, Medi-Cal requires justification from, as I said, a doctor or a speech therapist, medical professional, with at least 2 devices trialed. And then you can go back to the one you want. There are forms that the vendors are happy to provide and have provided on the Dynavox website and the Prenke-Romic website for device trial. And these are templates you can use to assist with the report writing to get the Medi-Cal or private insurance funding for those kinds of devices.
And Deb, Medi-Cal has a formulary that has approved devices.
Exactly.
Right? So they don't go outside approved devices.
So even if you have a student who did really, really well using an iPad with, say, an app on it like ProLiquid Go, it will not be covered under Medi-Cal at this point. And there's other devices too, like the Tango, which is actually is not covered under Medi-Cal.
But it is a dedicated device.
It is a dedicated device, but Medi-Cal won't pay for it yet. So anyway, these are things to be aware of. CCS, if you're looking for CCS to pay for a device, you would need the medical justification with a doctor's signature on it.
Is that for medical?
Medical. It's a
durable.
CCS pays for durable medical equipment and positioning devices.
Okay.
Private insurance, it varies. Again, you do need the doctor's prescription for that. And regional centers will pay for tools for students who are, or individuals who are regional center clients, but usually, not usually, now you do, need denials from any other funding source available. And that can include private insurance, that can include CCS if they're CCS clients, it can include the school if they're school clients. And there also has to be justification on how the assistive technology helps that client meet their regional center goals, their IFSP or IPP goals, which are the regional center plan goals. Okay?
Okay.
So that's kind of, be aware of what those agencies need to see. They're a little bit specific.
Okay, that's good to know. So now that brings us to after the actual assessment. We've got the report in hand. We are back at an IEP meeting, and we're looking at those recommendations. So
well, first thing you need to do is consider the data collected from the trial periods or the recommendations made from that formal assessment. Discuss within the team the modifications or the strategies needed, the training needs of the team, entire team, and any other related services. And then, of course, you need to help the team reach a consensus and then record the description of the AT and the AT services in the IEP.
So do you want to name the device itself, the name brand of the device?
Generally what you write is the features of the device that you're utilizing. So let's say you're going to be using your speech-generating device with 5 levels with at least 12 buttons per level. And then you would say these devices have that feature, and then you would let them know which devices have those features. So they can have some options if available. Now sometimes you're going to come across situations where there's only one device that has all those features, but then you can be specific that that's the only device you've found that currently has all those features, and then you just write the name of that device down.
And I'm sure that happens a lot with software as well. Educational software that would meet a student's needs would have to be that particular brand.
Exactly.
Okay. Uh-oh, Debbie. I think I hear something.
Oh, no, they're...
Yoo-hoo, Agnes! I brought you a piece of cake.
Oh, Gladys, you're such an angel. It's delicious. You're going to have to give me that recipe.
Sure thing. You don't have to twist my arm. After all that assessment information you gave me, I owe ya.
Really? What happened with your daughter?
Well, she contacted her IEP team, and they met again, this time with a speech-language therapist who specializes in those speaking devices. The therapist said she needed to try out some devices with my granddaughter in the classroom to find out what she might like. So they're going to do an assessment.
Oh.
My daughter is thrilled. She can't wait to find out about the technology that can help Samantha communicate.
Oh, I'm so happy for her. And for you, Gladys.
Yeah.
You know what, my grandson Joey, it took a couple of months of trying out the different software to find something that could help him. You know, the school district has 60 days. 60 days to complete the assessment. So it's not something that happens overnight. It was an ongoing process with lots of data collection. I hope your granddaughter's team will do the same. That's the only way to really know if something works or not. It's that data collection. In the end, some recommendations were made with solid data to justify the purchase of Joey's technology. The recommendations were in a report, and those were presented in an IEP meeting.
I'm so excited to see Samantha's report.
Yeah, Gladys, but it doesn't stop there.
What do you mean?
Well, then there's the training and implementation, etc., etc. But you know, that cake was good, but I'm still hungry.
Oh.
Grab your pocketbook and your bus pass, Gladys. We're going to head on downtown. It's early bird special at Denny's. I think if we hurry, we can still make it.
That's a great idea, Agnes. Let's let those crazy ladies with the weird accents take over for a while.
Well, Debbie, that was interesting.
That's one way of calling it.
Let's talk about implementation.
Yes, once we get to the right form.
Oh, we jumped ahead.
We're just making
There
it.
we
are. Sorry.
What are we going to do next? So, Agnes mentioned that there was a lot that happens in implementation. It just doesn't stop with the actual written report that's placed on the table. The successful implementation must happen with assistive technology. So what do we do?
Well, there should be an implementation plan developed. And that's so that everybody on team knows who's going to do what by when regarding the assistive technology. It assigns responsibilities to the individual team members. And again, it's not always going to have to be the one person. It can be multiple people. It also needs to specify what training, who needs to be trained, and by when.
Oh, I like that. By when, the timeline.
Timeline is so important. And you also have to address equipment management issues. Who's going to replace the batteries? Who's going to charge the device? Who's going to keep it upgraded? Who's going to work with the IT if it's software?
Who's going to make the overlays?
Exactly.
The device?
Exactly.
All of those things.
Timelines need to be assigned. Record the student performance while they're using the device. Monitor a plan for success.
Wait. So even after the assessment, you still have to collect data?
Making sure that it is indeed working the way you want it to work. And review, periodic review. That's part of the IEP now. So again, when you're looking at the team, you need to have commitment to roles and responsibilities.
That's important.
Very.
Communication.
So everyone knows.
Your team members.
And the best thing to do is to put all of this in writing. Who's going to do what by when, so that you have a written document to follow. And yes, there's a form. I won't get there. There's always a form.
All right.
Also, in terms of training, if no one knows how to use it, how are you going to find someone who knows how to use the device and train others in using that device or that software? Again, monitoring effectiveness and communication is so important between the team members.
So everybody needs to take responsibility.
Exactly.
For the action.
Now,
what about getting the equipment?
Well, first of all, what is the equipment and how much does it cost? And then you have to find out, some schools use POs for ordering equipment, some use, straight go to the vendor and order the equipment through a credit card. So who's going to do that? Who's going to find out how to order the equipment? Is this under low incidence funding? If so, that's a different form. So find out what the process is for ordering that equipment, who's going to do it, and by when will it be ordered. Plan for the training as needed. Also plan for who's going to set up the equipment once it's received, and establish your technical support system. Very important.
Okay, so someone needs to follow through with each step and handle any roadblocks.
Right, and there are roadblocks. There can be roadblocks. This is where a lot of things get bogged down.
Okay, well, those are team considerations. What about for the student? What do we need to consider?
We need to consider which tasks are we going to start with. If you're looking at a very complicated device, or even a new device for a student that's not so complicated, let's say a simple communication device, we have to introduce it to the student in a very natural setting, but you don't just give it to them and say, here you go, now use it. So you start with a task. So which task are we going to start with? And then what tasks are we going to build on those successes? Where will it be used? Will it be used in the lunchroom? Will it be used in the classroom? Will it be used on the bus?
At home.
Or at home, exactly. How often will it be used, and what
training does the student need? These are all things that need to be considered for the student.
Okay, and when will it happen?
Exactly,
and
by when.
By when.
And by when, absolutely.
Okay.
Those are things for the student.
And here we go.
Those are those forms. I love my forms. There's some great AT implementation forms available. One I've already mentioned off their website, the NATRI website, the Assistive Technology Implementation Plan. And there's another form, again, out of the UCAT Toolkit, which I've already talked about that website as well, which is AT implementation. These are just two forms that can be used as you're helping the IEP team create that all-important implementation plan for the
They are great forms. I can't recommend them highly enough.
Yes.
But wait.
There's more!
There's more. It doesn't end.
It never ends. Sorry.
There's also periodic review.
Yes.
Right? Even if it's functioning well for a time, it doesn't end there.
Well, because people change. People grow,
environments change.
Right.
Needs change.
And oftentimes, if they're introduced to a piece of technology that is successful for them, you see that they have a greater skill set than was originally determined that they had. So now you may need to change their goals, because suddenly you're seeing more from that student than you had before, and the goals can be changed to address the increased skills that the student has having. On the other hand, sometimes if the environment changes, you need to relook at training. Maybe there's a new teacher, so the teacher needs to be trained. The new teacher needs to be trained in the use of the device or the software.
And if the student can give feedback,
exactly,
it's also important to monitor and evaluate if they're happy with the technology, if they feel it's working.
Exactly.
Too.
Right.
Okay, so Debbie, you talked a lot about best practices.
Yes.
And we know that a lot of things happen out in the real world that may not necessarily be best practices. So how can these kinds of things become more standard? That's kind of what people want to know.
Right. Well, we're looking at system changes, and California right now is a broke state. We understand that. So this is pie in the sky. If we could do things differently, this is what we'd like to see happen. First, provide staff support and training in using a consistent process to determine AT needs. In other words, does the districts that you're working with, do the teams you're working with have a process they're using when they're determining the student's AT needs, or are they just checking off a box?
Using a set form, a referral process that they can
what is the process that they're using? The other thing you could do is provide staff training in how to write assistive technology into their IEP, into their regional center goals, into their 504 plans, their transition plans. How do you write that in appropriately? Of course, if you have a district, give them time to attend assistive technology trainings, conferences, listen to webinars, because assistive technology as a field is booming. I mean, iPad came out, a year and a half ago, and look what it's done already to change the landscape of AT tools. So it's continually growing and changing.
And staff should be aware of who to call when they need help, when they need guidance, when they need training.
Right.
And I think that's lacking a lot right now. And there aren't enough AT specialists out there that can even assist the teams. But the whole idea is that if the districts had the training for staff, they wouldn't need to call in as many outside experts and follow that expert model that we're really trying to get away from.
Right. And then, of course, locate funding or find a way to establish an AT library or evaluation center. Now, I know the AT Network has a great device lending library, but it doesn't have, how do I say this? The AT, you lend the device they ask for. And you help guide them the best you can in getting the right device to the right person, but that's not the role of the AT lending library. Their AT lending library is to allow the client or the consumer to choose the device and try it out. So how are we going to create some sort of evaluation center? That is really different. So now we're going to see who's still awake out there. So we're going to ask a couple questions, not too many because we're running out of time, and we appreciate that everybody who's hung in with us this long. So raise your hand, thank you, Dane, if you were paying attention. So when should a student be assessed? Thank you. For assistive technology. When should a student be assessed for assistive technology? Raise your hand if you know that answer.
Okay, Dane.
Oh,
Go ahead,
look
Dan.
at this. Oh, hey, you're awake.
Should we drop the microphone and...
Oh, let's see. Let's have, Dane had his hand up
Okay.
first. Dane, you answer this one.
Dane, I'm going to drop out here.
When?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, well, we're having some technical difficulties.
That always happens. Dane, if you want to just type in the answer, that would be fine too. We just want to know when should a student be assessed for assist, or if anybody else has that answer. When should a student be assessed for assistive technology? As soon as they begin the school year? Ooh, close. Close. Good thought. Good thought. But it's not when they begin the school year. They should be assessed for assistive technology. Okay, first of all, they should be considered for assistive technology if they have an IEP. They should be assessed for assistive technology after the team decides they need more information.
You don't know what to do.
Or the parent asks for it. Those are the two times a student gets assessed, is when the team determines the need for an assessment or the parent has requested an assessment.
And generally when you're doing a trial period of any nature, that would indicate an assessment, and that's when you need to uncover new information.
Right. Let me ask another question. Hopefully, just type in the answers. That might be easier. One more. This is it, I promise. What's the difference between consideration and assessment? Oh, that was on a slide way back in the beginning. Let's see who's awake still.
We've pondered this question.
Oh my God, we spent
For
hours
years.
on this. We have no life. Let's see. All right, we've got a hand raised. Okay, go. Let's see, Dane. Let's see.
Consideration comes before assessment.
Yep, good, Shannon. Exactly. Go ahead, Dane. You have it.
Chili.
Let's see. Who else has an answer? Well, we'll go ahead and get it out there.
During the Janice, excellent. Consideration is during the IEP process.
Exactly. It's a
when the
step.
IEP ends, and it's a step in the process.
Good.
That's right.
Yay! All right, we'll stop quizzing you. Sorry, we're just mean that way.
Okay.
So here's just a slide of resources for you to be looking at.
Some of them are repeats.
Some of these are repeats, and anyone involved can consider, but assessment can be done by the team or a specialist. That is correct. Exactly. And if you need more information, this is who PHP is and iTech Services. And we can be a resource for you guys as well. Just give us a call. And we do have a toll-free number down at the bottom, 855-727-5775. And again, I am going to be down at CSUN at the AT Network Day, doing a 2-hour
hands-on activities.
A lot of hands-on.
Reinforce the consideration process and assessment.
So, okay. So does anybody have any other questions?